read a couple quick verses, but I'm going to take this topic from 1 Samuel chapter 17. I'm going to go through that and summarize that, but if you want to turn there and read it, but I'd encourage you to read it on your own, but I'm going to try to summarize it because there's so much. But in 2 Timothy, turn there, chapter 2 and verse 1, Paul's talking to the young preacher, and he says, "Be thou therefore, my son, be strong in the grace that is in Christ Jesus." Simply just be strong, and where does he get the strength? From the grace in Jesus Christ. And then in Ephesians 6, in verse 10, similar thing. "Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and the power of his might." So the idea of talking about being strong in the faith, strong in God's grace, and you get that from God and his grace. And one of the examples I want to talk about is in 1 Samuel chapter 17, David and Goliath. I mean, we're all very familiar with this, so that's why I wasn't going to go through and read it. But there's so many interesting details in here when you read. There's specific to this point of being strong and courageous. So the topic I want to focus on is the idea of being courageous, courage. So David is the youngest of 8 sons of Jesse. They're going to battle with the Philistines. The armies are lined up. And then David's oldest 3 brothers go. They go to the battle and go forward. And David goes too. But he goes back and forth, it says, between Saul and his dad and watching the sheep because he's youngest and he's carrying back home. And then at one point, his dad tells him to take some food to go check and see how his sons are doing because, they don't get the information flow the same we do. So I'm sure he wanted to know, how are they faring? And he also had him give some food to the commander, which is probably giving David an excuse and good graces to be able to go into the front lines and talk to his brothers for whatever reason. Anyway, so he goes up and to check on his brothers, and he does as his father asked. He left the sheep with somebody to watch over them for him, with a keeper, in one version calls it. He goes up there, and he gets up to the armies, and both armies are together in array. They're shouting, and they're getting as if they're yelling and getting ready for battle, and they're all hyped up. But then earlier on, it talks about how this champion from the Philistines come forward. His name is Goliath of Gath, I believe it said. And so David gets to witness this Goliath come forth, and he had made a proposition, and the Bible describes this guy as huge. And I think my dad tried to do some technical measurements and specifics. My dad's like 6'3", and then he had this huge, like this big cue that Jeff uses to hold up on top of my dad's head, and that's about as tall as they estimated this guy to be. I mean, this guy's huge, and even his armor is just enormous weight as the measurements, if you equate it. And he makes this proposition for anybody, just a one-on-one, and that'll settle the whole war, this whole battle. Bring somebody out. If I win, you will serve us. If you win, we'll serve you. Of course, we know how that turned out and how well they fulfilled that agreement. But and David comes up to see his brothers, and he sees this going on, and he's asking, "What? Who's going to go out and be it? What's going on? Why is nobody standing up for him?" He's yelling and saying things about God, because it does say that Goliath is cursing in the name of their gods, lowercase, of the Israelites. He's like, "We're God's people," and so he's asking them around him. He's asking his brothers, but I believe it was the oldest brother, Eliab, gets angry at him, telling him, "You're just here to see the battle. What are you doing here?" And he's like, what are you talking? What have I done? I'm just asking a question. What's going on? And he turns and he asks the question again to other people, and he gets the same response from everybody. So nobody's standing up for it. Everybody's afraid. He doesn't understand why nobody's standing up for it. And they're getting angry at him for even questioning that nobody's standing up and being strong and having courage to deal with this. Well, Saul hears of what David had said. And I don't know how it got back to Saul, but the Bible says Saul heard David's questions. So he asked for David to come up. So David comes up, and David says, "Have no fear of your servant himself. I'll go after him." And this little guy who has no battle-hardened skills whatsoever, but Saul puts his armor on him. It didn't seem like even Saul argues with him, but he puts his armor on him, and David's like, I haven't battle tested this. I don't know how to use this stuff. So he takes it off, and they're looking at him, you're silly. So David just gets, the stones from the river, just soft, smooth stones, and he goes out to meet Goliath. And of course, Goliath is making fun of him. This is your champion. They called him youthful looking, ruddy, and it says, red, light-skinned, or red skin. So, maybe from the sun, but he has youth. He looks, I don't know, maybe I would equate to what we would call middle-aged teens, maybe younger, depending on how they equate the responsibilities, but a young guy. And then he doesn't look battle-hardened. He has no armor whatsoever, no weapons whatsoever. He called him with just a stick. You come out with just a stick. So, and of course, David stands up and says, yeah, I got, tells him he's going to take him out. And of course, David does, just with one stone, and that's it. And David takes Goliath's sword and cuts his head off, and everybody's like, this is great. So that's a perfect story. If you look at the details of that story, the youngest, youthful, no experience whatsoever, I'm sure, I would think he would be scared, because he's not going, God told me I'm going to win, but he's not afraid to stand up to him. It's like equating to going, kids when they're in school and kids standing up to a bully, so to speak. So he's not afraid. He does it. He might get beaten down, but he's going to stand up and he's going to do what's right and stick up for the victim here. So David, this is a perfect example of being strong in the Lord, standing up and having courage. And one of the verses that is very popular for saying that is in Joshua chapter 1. And this is just after Moses' death. God is talking to Joshua, and he tells him 3 times at the beginning of this chapter, be strong, be courageous, be very courageous. And then the 3rd time in verse 9, have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous. Do not tremble or be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Essentially, as long as we're doing the right thing, we're following God, God is with us. He didn't say we're not going to die. He didn't say we're not going to deal with the discouragements of the issues. He didn't tell Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego they weren't going to die in the fire and be burned, but they still stood up. And so the idea of having courage and standing up is difficult, especially with a lot of the culture changes and things that are really prevalent and very outspoken nowadays. And something happened with my son where that gave me this idea in the topic. One person, I heard a preacher from another denomination who said there's 4 types of Christians. You have one who say they're Christians, but they don't really know what they believe. I guess you could equate that to being Catholic. You can go, they call themselves Catholic, but they don't know half of what they believe or why. They just follow the repetitions, right? For some. 2, and the other one is one that they call themselves Christians and they know what they believe. The 3rd one would be somebody who says for us as a Christian, they know what they believe in and they try to follow it. And then the 4th one is who professes to be a Christian, knows it, follows it, and will do so even when they stand alone. And I think that's the most important one that we have to deal with, because there's so many situations where you stand alone, whether you're at work, whether you're at home, and even sometimes in Christians or other people. So, and David did this obviously with the entire army of Israel, and he's not battle hardened, and he's the one that had to stand up, and he won the battle for him. Can you imagine? So it's because God was with him, and he stood up. So I thought I would talk about the idea of courage. My younger son started wrestling, and it's co-ed, and so they put him in a position, and so we had talked about it, and he didn't understand at first, so we talked about it, and I told him, you're gonna have to decide what kind of man you want to be, and I'll let him choose. And he's like, all right. So he talked to the coach, and at first he blamed it on me, and I said, that's my job, blame it on me. I'll be the bad one. And so the coach ended up asking him, well, why don't you want to wrestle girls? And he says, well, because it goes against or my dad says I can't. He said, well, why? Is it a religious belief? And he said, partially. And the coach laughed at him. That's how he described it. I said, okay. So so he did it, and then later that day, he messaged me and tells me, he said, "You're right. Everybody was mad at me." So I told him, "If you do this, you'll be alone. So it's going to be up to you if you want to do it." And he did. And of course, now the coach wanted to talk to me. So he called me last night. And he wasn't very happy about it, but and wanted to argue the idea. Well, we had other Christians. So anyway, long story short, that gave me the idea of thinking about courage. And so it's very difficult. And there's another mythical situation. If you have 10 people who are Christians, 9 of them will stay in silent, statistically speaking, but 1 might stand up. And then when that 1 gets to that 10th person, and that 1 person stands up and actually speaks out against what it is, 3 or 4 now will stand up. So think about it. If you're the one standing up alone, even though others believe it, they're not standing up, right? But you will. But you standing up will also give courage to those who didn't have the strength earlier. So just because they don't stand up doesn't mean they don't have it, but you can give them the courage. So I wanted to do something to give you encouragement to stand up, and whatever it may be. It could be small, it could be big, because it's little things, big things, it's all the same. We're all just trying to do what's right and stick up and make it to heaven. So if there's anything we can do in that matter, or if there's any prayers that we can do to encourage you for that, please let us know. And as we don't want to leave without offering the opportunity for anybody to become a Christian who is not, this is the opportunity. So if you've heard the word, you believe it, you can make the confession, we can baptize you, and you can become a Christian tonight if that be your will. So if there's anything else we can help you in this matter, why don't you stand up? Come forward while we sing.
Careless soul, why will you linger, wandering from the fold of God?